Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plunging into the ancient world, specifically ancient Egypt.
Right, and focusing on one of its absolute core figures, Horus. He's complex, fascinating, and honestly changes shape quite a bit depending on when and where you look.
Exactly. We've got quite a pile of sources here, articles, notes, really trying to unpack his story, his many identities, and, his overall impact.
And our mission basically is to sift through all that, millennia of history, these different versions, the epic myths.
To figure out who Horus actually was to the ancient Egyptians, what did his story mean? Why was he so central for so long? Especially his connection to kingship.
Yeah, that kingship link is huge. When you picture Horus, it's usually that falcon, right? Or the falcon-headed man.
Definitely. And he wore so many hats, symbolically speaking, god of kingship, obviously, but also healing, protection, the sun, the sky.
It's a long list. And his worship stretches way, way back, like from prehistoric times right into the Roman period. That's incredible staying power.
But as you start digging, you realize Horus isn't just one single guy.
No, not at all. It's almost like a general term, or maybe a title, that covers a whole range of falcon deities. Egyptologists sometimes treat them as distinct gods.
But they also see them as like different facets of the same complex figure. It's layered, very layered.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The name itself.
Oh.
W. What does that tell us?
Well, the most obvious translation is falcon. Makes sense, given the imagery.
Right, but it might also mean something like the distant one, or one who is above, over.
Ah, so that immediately points to the sky, his connection to the heavens.
Exactly, and that visual, the falcon, often a lanner or peregrine or the falcon-headed man, it's so powerful. And he's often shown wearing the shet.
The double crown, symbolizing rule over all of Egypt, upper and lower.
Precisely. Now, when you look closer, you usually need to distinguish between two main versions or identities that pop up constantly.
Okay, who are they?
First, there's Horus the Elder, or Heru'ur.
Right, our sources say he's one of the oldest gods, part of that first group born from Geb the earth and Nut the sky.
Yeah, he's actually Osiris's brother in that early setup. He kind of predates the big Osiris myth we usually think of.
So in that older role, he's already tied to the sky.
Uh-huh. The sun and moon are sometimes called his eyes, scanning the world. A really potent image.
Wow, the god's gaze, always watching. Okay, so who's the other main Horus?
That would be Horus the Younger, Horupakherjerd. This is the Horus at the heart of the famous Osiris myth, the son of Isis and Osiris.
Ah, okay, the Avenger, the one destined to take back the throne from his uncle Set.
That's the one. And like one source says, Horus is mostly a general term for a great number of falcon deities. These two are key, but it shows that complexity right from the start.
So focusing on Horus the Younger, his story really kicks off with that huge tragedy, the Osiris myth.
Absolutely. You can't understand it without it. It starts with that ultimate act of jealousy and betrayal.
Osiris, the good king, brings civilization, and then his brother Set just murders him, brutally, dismembers him.
And scatters the pieces all over Egypt. It's designed to be the absolute end, no coming back, no heir.
But Set didn't count on Isis, Osiris's wife, sister, and an incredibly powerful sorceress.
Her determination is just incredible. She searches everywhere, gathers almost all the pieces.
There's that detail, often from Plutarch, about the missing piece, the phallus, right? Eaten by a fish.
Yeah, and she apparently fashioned a magical replacement. Though older Egyptian versions might differ slightly on the details, the core is her refusal to give up.
And she uses her magic to bring Osiris back, briefly.
Just long enough. It's in that magical moment she conceives Horus. Then Osiris descends to become king of the underworld.
So Horus is born from this collision of tragedy, intense love, powerful magic, and that makes him a target from day one.
Instantly. Set knows this child is the rightful heir, a direct threat to his stolen throne.
So Isis has to run. She flees to the Nile Delta, those dense, hidden papyrus marshes.
And raises Horus there in total secret. He's this hidden hope, growing up in the shadows.
Protected by his mother's magic, yeah, but destined for this huge, dangerous future.
And that childhood wasn't peaceful. The sources make it clear he faced constant danger.
Hunted by Set, basically, and his agents.
Exactly. Not just natural threats like scorpions and snakes, which were bad enough in the marshes.
But also dark magic, divine attacks, specifically aimed at killing the child Horus.
It sounds like a terrifying way to grow up, even for a god.
It really does. But it also highlights Isis's role, her incredible devotion, her skill with healing spells, protective magic. She was his shield.
The ultimate protective mother. And she wasn't entirely alone, right?
No, sources mention other deities helping out, goddesses like Selkit and Neith watching over him.
And Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic. One source mentions him providing guidance, spells, strategy.
So these trials weren't just things he survived, they actually forged him, didn't they? Sharpened his resolve for what was coming.
Absolutely. It was the crucible that made him ready for the confrontation with Set.
Which brings us to the main event, really. That epic, long-running battle for the throne. Horus versus Set.
This is the heart of the story for Horus the Younger. A brutal, complex fight for Egypt, for vengeance. Our sources say it went on for ages. Over 80 years in one account.
80 years of divine warfare and legal battles. That's something else. Who is judging this?
The Aeneid, the great council of the 9 major gods. They were like the divine court, hearing the arguments.
But they weren't all immediately on Horus's side.
Apparently not. One source mentions Ra, the head honcho, was initially hesitant. Maybe he favored Set's strength or just the status quo. It wasn't a simple case.
So part divine courtroom drama, part cosmic smackdown. What were some of the highlights or lowlights, depending on your perspective?
Well, Set often fought dirty using trickery. And the most famous injury, the one everyone knows, is when Set rips out Horus's eye.
Ah, the Eye of Horus. The Wedjat eye. So that symbol, the one you see everywhere.
Comes directly from this fight, yes.
Yeah.
One source describes it as representing Horus's cosmic perception. It gets injured, torn out.
But then it's magically restored, right?
Right.
By Thoth.
Usually by Thoth, yeah. And once healed, it becomes that powerful symbol: protection, royal power, healing, wholeness, even sacrifice. They got linked to goddesses like Isis, Wadjet.
And used constantly. Amulets, painted on boats for safety. It's amazing how that one moment in the myth created such an enduring symbol.
Truly iconic.
Yeah.
But Set didn't get off scot-free either.
No. What happened to him?
Sources say he suffered a major injury too. Depending on the telling, he lost a testicle, or was castrated, or badly wounded in that area.
Ouch. A bit of cosmic payback, maybe. And then there's that really weird story involving lettuce.
Yes. The semen trick. It shows up in some key texts. It's pretty wild.
Go on.
Set tries to dominate Horus sexually, to assert his power over him. But Horus is smart. He catches Set's semen, doesn't let it enter him, disposes of it.
Okay.
Then Isis gets Horus's semen and spreads it on lettuce leaves, Set's favorite food.
Oh boy. I think I see where this is going.
Yep. Set eats the lettuce. Later, before the gods, Set claims he dominated Horus. Thoth calls forth Set's semen. It answers from the river, where Horus threw it.
So Set's claim is debunked.
Right. Then Thoth calls Horus's semen, and it answers from inside Set.
Whoa, so Horus technically dominated Set.
Symbolically?
Exactly. A crucial, if rather strange, turning point in the divine court, proving Horus's cleverness and dominance.
That's memorable. Definitely memorable. Were there other contests? More conventional ones?
Yeah, like a boat race. Set challenges Horus to race in boats made of stone.
Which sounds impossible.
It is. But Horus builds a wooden boat and just paints it to look like stone.
Clever. And Set's stone boat.
Sinks like like a stone. Horus wins easily.
So after 80 years of fights, tricks, divine legal battles, how does it finally end?
The gods, the Aeneid, finally rule in Horus's favor. Maybe Isis's cleverness swayed them, or Neith mediated. Set is defeated.
Vanished.
Often, yeah. Vanished to the deserts. The wild lands outside of ordered Egypt, which were always sort of his domain anyway. Right. Represents chaos being pushed back.
Though some sources mention maybe dividing the kingdom, like Horus gets the fertile land, Set gets the desert, or Upper and Lower Egypt. That idea exists too, suggesting maybe a balance rather than total victory. But major texts like the Memphite theology have Geb, the earth god, give all of Egypt to Horus. The key takeaway is Horus wins, restoring Maiad order, justice, truth after Set's chaos.
And that victory is what cements the link between Horus and the pharaohs.
Absolutely fundamental. Horus becomes the rightful king, the uniter of the two lands. His triumph establishes the model. Every single pharaoh after that was considered the living Horus on earth.
Not just his representative, but his living incarnation.
That's the core belief. The king was Horus, ruling Egypt, maintaining Maat, just like the god did. You see it in the earliest royal symbols.
Like the Seraph, that palace symbol with the falcon on top.
Exactly. It shows Horus, the king, residing in the palace. Kings took a Horus name as their primary title, and later a golden Horus name too.
It makes perfect sense for legitimizing power. If the king is the god who defeated chaos, who's going to argue?
Precisely. It creates stability. And the cycle continues after death. The pyramid texts say the pharaoh is Horus in life.
and becomes Osiris in death, joining the gods.
Right. And the new pharaoh takes the throne as the next Horus. It's an eternal cycle mirroring the myth.
And some scholars think this myth might even reflect real history, like early conflicts.
There are theories, yeah. Maybe it echoes the unification of Egypt, with Horus-worshipping groups from places like Nekhen conquering rivals associated with Set, like Naga.
Or maybe later conflicts, like that pharaoh who used Set's symbol instead of Horus's.
Seth Perbsin in the Second Dynasty, yeah. Followed by Kasekemwe, who used both. Some see that as evidence of a real political or religious struggle and eventual reconciliation reflected in the divine story.
Fascinating how myth and history might intertwine. But Horus wasn't just this one story, this one form. We said he was multifaceted.
He really was. Over thousands of years, he showed up in lots of different forms, emphasizing different aspects.
So besides Horus the Younger, who else should we know about? We mentioned Horus the Elder, Horus.
Right, the ancient sky god form, eyes as sun and moon, sometimes seen as distinct, sometimes merged with the younger. The Greeks linked him to Apollo. It's fluid.
And Horus the Child, Horus Packard.
Yep, often shown as a little kid with a finger to his mouth, side lock of hair, symbolizing youth, the rising sun.
And the Greeks turned him into Harpocrates, god of silence.
Yeah, they misinterpreted the finger-to-mouth gesture. Funny how that happens. He became really popular in the Greco-Roman world.
What about that winged sun disk symbol on temples?
That's Horus-Bedeti, Horus of Bedet, a powerful symbol of royalty, divinity, protection. You see it everywhere, especially over entrances.
And the Great Sphinx at Giza, connected to Horus, too.
Tahara Meket, or Harmachis, Horus in the horizon,
Yep.
represents the dawn, the rising sun, royalty, often shown as a sphinx, like the Great Sphinx, or a Hierophant Sphinx lion body, falcon head.
Okay, and there were others. Harpera, Horus the Sun.
Another solar aspect, yeah, sometimes part of local triads. And the sources list even more. Harnedge-Hef, protector of Osiris. Huriyun-Mutef, a priestly role, even one with a crocodile body, Hori-Mishana.
Wow. It really drives home that Horus was this huge, adaptable concept.
Definitely, and all these forms were worshipped across Egypt.
In temples seen as the god's actual home on earth, right? With priests going into the inner parts, public in the courtyard.
Exactly. Huge cult centers existed.
Yeah.
Edfu is probably the most famous. Its temple is amazingly preserved, dedicated to Horus of Bedet.
Kamambo, too, right? Though he shared that one.
Yeah, with Sobek, the crocodile god. Also Kem, Pe, Bedet itself, Abu symbol. Horus was everywhere.
And Edfu had specific festivals, didn't it? Reenacting the myths.
Absolutely. Yeah. The big one was the Festival of Victory, Heb-Nektet, an annual sacred drama.
Where the king played Horus.
The king or a priest, yeah. They'd ritually defeat Set, who was represented as a hippopotamus. They'd harpoon the hippo figure.
So theater, but also deeply religious and political, reaffirming the king's role as Horus, the victor over chaos.
Exactly. And they also had a coronation of the sacred falcon ceremony at Edfu. A real falcon was chosen and crowned to represent Horus the king.
A living embodiment. Amazing. Now, Horus wasn't just about life and kingship. He had a role in the afterlife, too.
He did, especially through the figures known as the Four Sons of Horus.
The guys on the canopic jars, the ones that held the organs during mummification.
Those are the ones. They were protectors of the preserved organs, which were essential for the deceased in the afterlife.
Each son had a specific organ and a specific head, right?
That's right. Imseti was human-headed, protected the liver, linked to the south, and Isis, baboon-headed, protected the lungs, north, protected by Nephthys, jackal-headed, stomach, east, protected by Ni, hawk-headed, intestines, west, protected by Selkut.
It's incredible how detailed it was, linking gods, animals, directions, organs, protectors. Shows how interconnected everything was in their worldview.
And the four sons were called friends to the dead. Horus himself was invoked at funerals for protection. His protective power extended beyond life.
So, looking back at everything, Horus's story is just fundamental to Egypt. Patron of kings, protector, symbol of order, Mat.
Absolutely. His legacy permeated everything for millennia. Art, religion, politics, everyday belief.
Now, there's a point raised in some of the sources that's pretty controversial. The idea that Horus influenced Christianity.
Ah, yes. That comes up. Various writers, the sources name people like Cooper, Akaria S., Massey, Kuhn, have suggested parallels between Horus, especially Horus the child, and Jesus. They argued Christianity borrowed heavily from Egyptian myths, maybe the Isis cult.
But it's crucial to stress, as our World History Encyclopedia source does very strongly, this is highly disputed.
Extremely disputed. That source specifically argues against it, calling the comparisons inaccurate.
What specific parallels does it debunk?
Things like claims of both being born in caves, births announced by angels, baptism, temptation, wise men visiting, raising the dead.
And the source says these claims misrepresent the actual Egyptian beliefs about Horus and the biblical accounts.
Yes, it argues the parallels are forced, based on factual errors about both traditions. It calls it shoddy comparison and extremely poor scholarship.
It also points out basic differences in worldview, like about resurrection.
Right. The Egyptian afterlife was about continuation in another realm, not usually returning to earthly life like in the resurrection stories.
And Horus as a savior figure, the shed.
He was seen that way, yes.
Huh.
Especially Horus the child, trampling snakes and scorpions. A savior from earthly danger, sickness, threats.
But the source argues not a savior from sin in the Christian sense.
Exactly. A different kind of salvation. So while the idea of influence is out there in some sources, other sources we have strongly refute it based on the evidence. It's important we just report what the different sources say.
Agreed. But setting aside that specific controversy, the story's Horus itself clearly has universal appeal, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The hero's journey, the fight against chaos, the quest for justice. These themes resonate everywhere.
And you see that today. He keeps popping up in popular culture.
Totally. Jewelry, tattoos, sure, but also big stuff. Moon Knight, Night at the Museum, games like Smite, books like the Kane Chronicles, films.
The Gods of Egypt, yeah. His image, his story clearly still captures the imagination. And of course, the actual physical legacy, like that incredible temple of Edfu.
Still standing, a testament to his enduring importance.
So we've really journeyed through his life from that hidden child in the marshes
Protected by magic, forged by danger.
to the triumphant king, restoring order, becoming the divine blueprint for pharaohs.
His story is just essential for understanding how the Egyptians saw their world cosmic order, justice, kingship, that constant fight against chaos, against Set.
And all those different forms just show how complex and adaptable ancient gods could be.
It really makes you think about how deeply they connected the divine to earthly rule, or how vital that balance, Ma'at, was.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what does it leave you, our listener, thinking about? Maybe how these ancient stories might reflect real historical shifts, like Egypt's unification.
Or perhaps the sheer lasting power of symbols like the Eye of Horus, how it traveled through millennia.
Or maybe just how those core themes, vengeance, sticking it out, fighting for what's right, that endless battle between order and chaos still show up in our stories today. Sometimes in surprising ways, but maybe always echoing that watchful falcon god in the Egyptian sky.